organ in the human body and contributes to impotence, impaired vision, bad breath, discolored fingernails, and teeth. E-cigarettes, e-cigs, or electronic nicotine delivery systems, ENDS, can be just as harmful. Many of the e-liquids in e-cigarettes contain nicotine, which is addictive and toxic. Nicotine use can also disrupt adolescent brain development. Early use of e-cigarettes also increases the likelihood of tobacco addiction in later years and can result in a graduation to even more dangerous substances. Besides nicotine, some e-cigarettes contain other harmful substances, including heavy metals like lead, volatile organic compounds, cancer-causing chemicals, and tiny particles that penetrate deep into the lungs. E-cigs, whether they contain nicotine or not, can also cause injuries from fires and explosions from batteries. Children and adults have been poisoned by swallowing, breathing, or absorbing e-cigarette liquid through their skin or eyes. The proposed Tobacco Control Act seeks to protect Jamaica's youth from use and exposure to tobacco smoke, nicotine, and other harmful substances. Let us give the next generation a chance to live and breathe easily. I am Denise Bingham, and I'm from the National Council on Drug Abuse.
For little people, it's a really big world. A big world to discover and explore. And because discoveries aren't always easy to understand, little people need help to make sense of the big world. So help them make sense of the world. When you see PG, do PG. The Broadcasting Commission, your partner for a new day.
Jamaica. The celebration of our independence has been chronicled by iconic artists and unforgettable songs. This year, as we celebrate Jamaica 60, which Jamaican will take their place in this historic legacy? Join us for the presentation of the 10 finalists in the Jamaica Festival Song 2022 competition, live on PBCJ on July 14th at 9 p.m.
The NITS enrollment process is easy as 1, 2, 3. In order to enroll into the NITS, an applicant must be a citizen of Jamaica or ordinarily resident for 6 months and above. Persons must submit documents such as birth certificate, proof of address, or marriage certificate. Step 1. Applicants will be able to pre-enroll online or visit the nearest enrollment center. Step 2. Applicants' biometric data and supporting documents are collected at an enrollment site. A reference number will be given for the applicant to track the application online. Step 3. Once the verification is done, a notification will be sent to the applicant to collect, pin, and activate their national identification card. The process is now completed, and your ID card can now be used to verify your identity.
Jamaica is a beautiful place. Our people have a beautiful spirit, but we are too aggressive, and the way we interact with our friends and neighbors, I genuinely believe that we have the capacity to deal with this problem of violence. But it's going to take all of us. It's going to take every organized group of Jamaicans that we fundamentally reject violence. Violence has no place in a modern society.
Do you wish there were a way your community could get funding to improve a school, health center, sports program, and more? There is! It's the Constituency Development Fund. Here are a few things you probably didn't know about the CDF and how you can make it work better for you. The CDF policy promotes citizen participation in community development and the protection of taxpayers' funds. It outlines that MPs are to meet with citizens at least once every 2 years to agree on the projects needed. You know, it used to be once a year. We should really go back to that. Projects developed without community consultation are not to be approved by the bipartisan CDF Parliamentary Committee. There are 26 government agencies that implement projects, usually for a small fee. Funds are provided directly from the Office of the Prime Minister to the implementing agency, not through the Member of Parliament. The CDF unit monitors project costs and implementation, so if you have questions about how the CDF are run in your community, contact them. To ensure no one project or community gets all the funds, there are 6 project categories with spending limits for each. There must be no less than 5 and no more than 20 projects each year. To learn more, visit jampja.org to view your MP's CDF info and tell them how this fund has impacted you. If you don't see your MP's CDF reports, then put them under little pressure, man. Call, tweet, email. Ask them when they'll submit it and when is the next CDF meeting. Change is possible. It's already happening. What we need is you. A message from the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, funded by the European Union and the Inter-American Development Bank in partnership with the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica.
Like that, oh, all day and night, oh. But in that hour of desperation, I almost lost my life. Don't run me out yet, I'm still running. I fell down, but I got up fighting. My eyes are on God's kingdom of ways. Yes, if you're having any problem.
Of restructuring public sector compensation. Compensation consists of not only wages and salaries, but compensation also takes into account benefits such as pension and terms and conditions such as leave entitlements. In 2018, the government of Jamaica reformed the Pension Act to make public sector pensions equitable, fair, simple, easy to administer, and sustainable. As previously indicated, our discussions about the details of the compensation restructure take place with public sector unions, with bargaining groups, with professional associations around the conference table. And that has been going well. We have completed first round consultations with all public sector unions and bargaining groups. And we are progressing with second round consultations. Sometimes, however, it is necessary for me to signal to the country the direction of the reform, as I did a few weeks ago when I mentioned that all persons in the public service who earn at the lowest ends, at the lowest levels, persons earning $500,000 a year, $480,000 or $450,000 a year, $600,000 a year, that those persons can expect a substantial upgrade in the compensation restructuring. Today, I intend to similarly signal the direction of this reform as it relates to maternity leave, paternity leave, and family leave. Coming out of the compensation restructure and in reviewing the terms and conditions of service, the government of Jamaica has decided to update the terms of maternity leave and to introduce a provision for paternity leave and leave for adoptive parents in the public service. All of these are components of total compensation. The government of Jamaica intends to update the Public Service Staff Orders of 2004 to increase maternity leave from 40 days to 3 calendar months. The government of Jamaica also intends to update the Public Service Staff Orders of 2004 to introduce paternity leave for the first time in the public service for fathers of newborns for a specific time and under specific terms to be finalized. The government of Jamaica also intends to update the Public Service Staff Orders of 2004 to introduce family leave for adoptive parents who are bringing a new child into the home. My fellow Jamaicans, we are working to modernize Jamaica's public service. And modernization is multifaceted. It includes pursuing efficiency and simplification. It embraces fairness and equity in compensation. It involves the application of technology to boost access and to enhance productivity. It requires better customer service. And yes, it also embraces changes in terms and conditions that better reflect our values. To give effect to these changes, the appropriate circular will be sent to members of the public service by September 30th. Now, let me also say that there are members of the public service who earn at the lowest, as I mentioned, salaries at the lower rung of the compensation table, who will be faced with back-to-school responsibilities before the compensation restructuring comes into effect and in the context of global inflationary pressures. I want you to know that we are working to ensure that we will have in place a program that persons who earn at the lowest levels in the public service can be assisted with back-to-school support in the same way we are assisting non-PATH students with support. Ladies and gentlemen, the process of modernizing our public service, of restructuring compensation in the public service, could not come at a better time. It involves the work of scores of persons in the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service and in the Transformation Implementation Team, working alongside scores of public sector unions and bargaining groups. At a future date, I will be able to provide more updates on the progress being made. I thank you.
At this time, we'd like to invite any member of the media who's joining us from Zoom to go ahead and ask questions. Please put it inside the chat, or you can indicate and we'll answer them. Please ensure that you identify yourself, your media host, and your name before you go ahead and ask a question. Question from Stephen Jackson from the media. What's the potential cost to the public sector for paternity leave?
Thank you for asking that question, Stephen. We will, at the time when we are going to be announcing the fact that we have reached agreement on all terms, I will share that information with you. It would be premature to share that with you at this point. But the cost would bear some relationship with the numbers that one can expect in any one year. But you'll notice from my statement that I mentioned that the terms and conditions are yet to be finalized. There are aspects of paternity that differ from maternity, and you don't have to think hard to understand that. And therefore, terms and conditions will need to be finalized. And those terms and conditions will have an impact on what the potential cost will be. But we have no doubt about the principle. And we want the terms and conditions in the public service to reflect our values and to reflect our principles.
The Minister Stephen wants to tell you that it's a great move, by the way, and that the scholars will definitely endorse. I think we have a question by
Thank you, Stephen.
by Ms. Zara Burton. Your hand is raised. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Dr. Clark. I wanted to talk about my friend Lloyd D. Aguilar's, his People's Anti-Corruption Movement. He's been calling for some time now a forensic audit of public debt, of all the public debt. I wanted to know, would you support such a forensic audit?
Well, I mean, Jamaica's public debt is transparently disclosed in multiple government documents over a long period of time, and is subject to the purview of the Auditor General and other oversight bodies. I mean, our public debt can be broken down into domestic debt and into foreign debt, and the domestic debt consists of marketable securities. The foreign debt consists of debt to multilateral institutions and bilateral debt. And it's not that complicated to understand. I can share with you the overview of what the numbers are if you're interested in that.
No, but in terms of forensic audit, I think what he's saying is that he believes that the debt could be corrupt. And so I'm just wondering, your view on a forensic audit. Would you support a forensic audit of all the public debt?
Well, we operate a principle of full transparency on Jamaica's debt. All of Jamaica's debt and the obligations and what we owe, the terms of what we owe, they are available for full inspection by any member of the public at any time. So I think that openness should be responsive to the nature of your question. I don't know that a forensic audit would be necessary given the level of transparency over a long period of time with respect to Jamaica's debt.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so Splat from the Ministry of Education and Youth wants some further explanation on the public sector back to school support.
Yeah, so what I just said is that for persons at the lowest end of the spectrum, remember, we don't have resources to intervene for everyone, but for persons who earn at the lowest levels of the public service, we'll be working on ways in which we can make the support available to you. And I will announce that in greater detail very shortly, clearly, because it would have to be in place for August. But it would be targeted, it would be open to persons who are earning at the lowest levels in the public service. And the reason why we would be doing this at this time is, simply because the new compensation won't be in place it's unlikely to be in place prior to those back-to-school expenses, which we know will be elevated given global inflationary pressures.
Okay, Kimon Francis, please state your media house and go ahead with your question.
Thank you. Afternoon, Kimon Francis from the Gleaner. Minister, as a country, we're just about in that anniversary period of what became known as FinSAC. Can we get a timeline for the release of the report? And if not, what is causing the delay?
Okay. So as you know, as you are aware, as a member of the media, Kimon, there have been the commissioners of the FinSAC Commission completed their data gathering exercise and began to write up their report. The government provided funding for that report to be written and further funding when the initial funding was exhausted. The government of Jamaica, and this is not new information, this is information that I believe you have already if you check your records, and has already been printed in your paper. A third or a subsequent request came, and the government made a decision not to provide that further funding. But that does not mean that is the end of the matter, however. The evidence given in writing and orally and the data that was assembled under the structure of the Commission of Inquiry still exists, and we're working on mechanisms through which the assessment of that data can be made available to the public in a way that we are confident that taxpayer dollars will be well spent. But yeah. No, I hope that answers your question, Kimon.
Thank you very much, Minister. I know we have a lot of persons asking a million questions, but we do have a time restraint. So we just want to take the final question and bring it back to the topic at hand. Alicia Williams from the Jamaica Observer, for clarification, wanted to find out about the paid maternity leave and paid paternity leave for the full period stated, and when will these changes be in effect? So the amount of time and when will the changes be in effect?
Remember, we're speaking about the public service here. We're not speaking about the private sector. In the public service, the Public Service Staff Orders of 2004 provide for 40 days paid maternity leave for female members of the public service. And we will be updating that to allow female members of the public service to have the benefit of 3 months of paid maternity leave. We will, the public service staff orders can be updated by way of a circular from the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service sent to all public sector employees, or all employees of the public service. And by September 30th, or on September 30th, that circular will go out. The circular will specify the effective date, which of course will be, somewhere around that time. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you to everybody in the media.
No, I'll take. It's okay. If there are questions, let's take a few more. If we can keep it on topic.
Beautiful.
But I want to be open to members of the media.
Okay, so Mr. Edmund Campbell from the Gleaner, could you go ahead, please?
Thank you very much, Dr. Clark. Just 2 quick questions. Will the compensation review at all levels now, will it take into account the sharp increase in inflation in recent times? And when do you anticipate that the ministry will begin to start making payments under the compensation review exercise?
Right. So we are at an advanced stage of discussions with many bargaining groups and professional associations and unions, and some we are less advanced. It would be very premature for me to answer that question here, Edmund. We process those questions around the conference table and around the bargaining table, and I would undermine that process if I sought to have that conversation with you instead of with my counterparts and colleagues around the bargaining table. I really hope that you can respect and understand that. I'm hoping that very shortly, however, by virtue of what we enter into, those questions will be resolved for all to see. But I have to keep that around the conference table for the time being.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Javine Malcolm from CVM TV. Could you go ahead, please? Sorry, McLean. Javine McLean. All right. In the meantime, we have another question. This person didn't identify themselves, but they're asking about, will there be a standard number of days for vacation leave? They want to know what adjustments will be made for vacation leave, I guess, because of the paternity and maternity leave adjustment.
Right. So again, those are not questions that are in the scope of today's release. Members of the public service have representatives, and those representatives have responsibilities, and I have to respect their role. While we are in discussions about some of these very issues, it would be disrespectful to them to answer that question in the way that you would want me to. And again, I hope you can understand that.
Okay, Splat from Ministry of Education and Youth asking about book vouchers. Will the book vouchers be prepared and issued to the MDAs?
Right, the exact modality we will be, I think you're speaking about how we plan to intervene on behalf of the lowest, the persons who earn the least in the public service, in terms of, some kind of support around the back to school time. The modality we plan to discuss with representatives, and hopefully we will zone in on what is efficient and what works. I know book vouchers are used in some forms of intervention, and they work in those forms, but I have to ensure that it's appropriate for what we have in mind, and I would prefer to engage in some further consultations before being too definitive about that.
We're going to try again for Javine McLean from CVM TV.
Yes, good afternoon, Minister. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes. So I'd like you to comment on the JTA's dissatisfaction of the compensation package for teachers, and I'm hearing that they have not heard anything for some months now.
Right. Again, I would be, how things have evolved is they may be free to make that comment to you, but I don't have that freedom to respond to you about that question. If your claim is correct, my response would be best directed to the JTA. And again, I hope you can understand that.
Mr. McLean? All right, we're going to move on to the next person, Vaughn Davis from JIS. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Minister. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, Minister, just a quick question. Can you say to what extent remote work is being considered as a means to provide some economic relief to members of the public service who are experiencing challenges related to the current economic climate, considering war in Russia and Ukraine and inflation and so on and so forth?
Yes, that's a very interesting question. That's a discussion we can have with, the leaders of the day-to-day leaders in the public service, the permanent secretaries. It's it's multivariate though, right? To the extent that you implement something like that, you also would have to bear in mind the impact on the wider economy, which would mean lower levels of economic activity, a slowdown in economic activity if people stayed at home. And so while it could have a short-term benefit, if the costs of working at home are lower, they could have a negative spillover effect to the rest of the economy that we would have to consider before implementing something like that. Not just the immediate and short-term effect of it, but the secondary and tertiary effects and the longer-term impact, which could work together to undermine the very thing that you're trying to solve.
And I guess we can leave it there. Can we take one last question, or?
Okay, we can take another question.
Okay, so this is the last one, so make it count. Andre Wright, please identify your media host before you ask your question.
The Gleaner, Andre Wright of The Gleaner. Minister, what considerations came into play not to extend the various leave entitlements as a national imperative instead of narrowly for public sector workers?
No, so you remember the law concerning maternity leave is well established and doesn't need interference. Here we're speaking about the standards in the public service, which are in some cases less generous up until this announcement than in elements of the private sector. So here we will bring in maternity leave to 3 months in the public service as obtains in other areas in the private sector. So it's not, and in many cases, we make changes in our society and signal the direction we want the society to move in with what we do in the public service. Right? So this move is speaks to our values, and we're putting the country's money where the country's values are, or where our values are, and seeking to also bring online, to include the modern day reality of adoption, and also to include fathers who are important elements of the family unit, and recognizing that today's family unit often consists of 2 working parents, as opposed to several decades ago when family units often had 1 working parent.
All right, and we will leave it there. Thank you very much, Minister, for sharing some very interesting information with us this afternoon. And thank you, members of the media, and everybody else who tuned in to join us this afternoon. I am confirming that we are going to be sending some information out. So everybody from the media, please check your emails in a short while. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and join us next time for another press conference, whenever that is. Have a good evening.
Whenever you hear the following tone, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, ODPEM, will be giving information on an emergency situation affecting the island.